For years, the truth stayed hidden, the victims forgotten, the cases left cold, until science revealed what time could not. This is decades in the dark, where cold cases are brought back to light. She went to a party, a normal night, a group of women, a chance to relax and step away from everything for just a few hours. It was the kind of night no one thinks twice about. But by morning, she was gone. And what happened in those hours in between is something no one has ever been able to fully explain. Tamla Horsford was 40 years old, a mother of 5, and someone people described as warm, funny, and full of life. The kind of person who made people feel comfortable the moment she walked into a room. On the night of November 3, 2018, she left her home in Forsyth County, Georgia, to attend what was supposed to be a simple overnight gathering. A small group of women from a local moms group had planned a sleepover, just a chance to unwind, drink, laugh, and take a break from everyday life. It wasn't unusual. It wasn't risky. It was just a night out. There were about 8 women at the house, most of them connected through their children's activities. Tamla was the only black woman there. The night started the way so many do. Conversation, drinks, and games like Cards Against Humanity. Photos and short video clips from the evening show her smiling, laughing, completely at ease. There were no signs of tension, no arguments, no indication that anything was wrong. Outside, the weather was mild for early November. Cool, but comfortable. The house had a covered second-story deck, and as the night went on, people naturally moved between inside and outside. At some point, the group split up. Some stayed indoors, others went out onto the deck. Tamla moved between both. The gathering had been described as a women-only sleepover. But at some point during the night, there were also 3 men at the house, moving in and out of the space. Exactly when they arrived, how long they stayed, and how much interaction they had with Tamla isn't clearly established. It's one of several details that would later raise questions, not because of what is known, but because of what isn't. As the night continued, people began drifting off to sleep in different areas of the house. Some went to bedrooms, some stayed on couches, and Tamla, at some point, ended up outside. Investigators later reviewed activity from the home's door alerts, trying to piece together a timeline. At 1:40 a.m., the garage door opened and never closed. At 1:47 a.m., the front door opened as one guest left, though accounts differ on whether Tamla walked her out. And at 1:57 a.m., the back door leading to the deck opened, and remained open until her body was discovered hours later. It created a sequence of events, but not a clear explanation. Some of the women later said Tamla had wanted one last cigarette before going to bed. Near where she was found, investigators did locate a cigarette and a lighter. Details that suggest she had been outside shortly before the fall, but not what happened next. This is where the timeline breaks apart. When investigators later asked what happened, the answers didn't fully line up. Some women said they last saw Tamla around midnight. Others believed it was later. One person said she had fallen asleep inside at one point. Another believed she had gone back outside afterward. There was no clear agreement, no single timeline, and no one could say exactly when she was last seen alive. Sometime during the early morning hours, Tamla fell from the second-story deck. The drop was estimated to be between 14 and 20 feet. She landed in the backyard below, face down. No one saw it happen, no one reported hearing it, and no one knows exactly when it occurred. Around 8:30 the next morning, one of the women looked outside and saw Tamla lying in the yard. Emergency services were called, but it was already too late. The 911 call that followed captured the moment in real time. The caller told dispatch, "We had people over last night. We were drinking. Most of us went to bed. One of them stayed on the balcony. She was drinking. We just went outside and she is laying face down in the backyard." Before investigators even arrived, a version of what happened had already been said out loud. The autopsy determined that Tamla died from multiple blunt force injuries, consistent with a fall from height. Her blood alcohol level was approximately 0.238, which is 3 times the legal limit. She also tested positive for THC, In addition, a small amount of Xanax was found in her system. There was no clear explanation for how it got there. No one at the party admitted giving it to her. Investigators later learned that one attendee had a prescription and had shared medication with others in the past, though she said she did not give any to Tamla. But there were details that didn't fully settle. One of them was the lack of blood at the scene. Despite a severe injury to her wrist, described by an independent examiner as a compound fracture, very little blood was found nearby. What blood was present appeared on the opposite sleeve from the injury, raising questions about when and how that injury occurred. There were also differences between the official autopsy and an independent one commissioned by her family. While both agreed on the cause of death being blunt force injuries, the independent review questioned aspects of the findings, including how certain injuries were classified and whether they aligned with a fall from that height. Even her position raised questions. She was found face down, nearly beneath the balcony. Some initially described her arms as being down by her sides, palms up. But scene photos later showed one arm positioned differently, bent off to the side. Subtle details, but ones that didn't fully align. From the beginning, the case was treated as an accident, and that assumption shaped how the investigation unfolded. The scene was not preserved as a full crime scene. Witnesses were not all immediately separated. Phones were not initially collected. Investigators later requested photos and videos from the night, but by the time records were reviewed, some devices had been replaced and some data was no longer available. There were also questions about the response that morning. Some close to the case later asked why more life-saving efforts weren't attempted, and how quickly it was determined that nothing could be done. Body camera footage captured another detail. Deputies at the scene appeared to recognize some of the people inside the house. Casual familiarity in a situation that was anything but casual. The homeowner's boyfriend had ties to the local court system and was later fired after accessing case-related information. The lead investigator on the case would later resign amid unrelated misconduct involving the sharing of confidential information. Authorities maintained that none of this affected the outcome of the investigation, but for many, it raised concerns about trust. As the case gained attention, something else began to surface. Disturbing anonymous messages, sent in the aftermath of Tamla's death. Messages that referenced her final moments in graphic detail. The sender was never publicly identified, and investigators never connected those messages to what happened that night. But for her family, it added another layer of pain. The messages described her death, as if someone knew more than they should, but whether they were meaningful or just cruel speculation was never determined. Tamla was the only black woman at the gathering. There has never been any official finding that her death was racially motivated. But for many, the concern wasn't just about what happened that night. It was about whether the investigation was handled as thoroughly as it should have been. And that concern didn't exist in a vacuum. Forsyth County has a long and complicated history. In 1912, nearly all of its black residents were driven out through violence and intimidation in what has been widely documented as a case of racial expulsion. For decades afterward, the area remained overwhelmingly white. There is no evidence directly connecting that history to what happened that night. But for some, it made the unanswered questions harder to ignore. Two separate investigations, first by the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office and later by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, reviewed the case. Both reached the same conclusion: accidental fall. Officially, the case is closed. But for many, it doesn't feel finished, because no one saw her fall, no one heard it happen, and some of the most important moments still don't have clear answers. So the question is, what do you think really happened that night? This is Decades in the Dark, where science brings the past to light. Subscribe for more stories where justice never expires.